This video is a part of Project Revolution, a history YouTuber collaboration where we talk about the various revolutions throughout history. I encourage you after this video to go through the playlist linked on my channel and in the description to watch them all. House of History before me is doing a video on the Boxer Rebellion, while Guy Bloke is making a video on the interesting bottleneck-free state that existed in Germany for a few years after World War I. This video, meanwhile, will discuss the Chinese Revolution. Or, if you want to be more technical, one revolution, one revolt, and one civil war. It's complicated, to say the least. So, to say Chinese history is vast is an understatement. I'm not even going to try to cover it all here. Just know that China has either been a single monarchy or multiple divided monarchies throughout its entire history up until the 1900s. Dynasty after warlord after dynasty over and over. One consistent theme throughout this cycle was something known as the Mandate of Heaven, the concept that the Chinese emperor is in charge because heaven said he was. But if he does a bad job and gets too corrupt, the heavens might be angry and choose someone else to take his place and start another dynasty. It was pretty similar to the European concept of the divine right of kings idea, and in a way this helped promote the idea of requiring an emperor of some kind in Chinese society to keep order, or else that society would just fall apart. However, just like the divine right of kings in Europe had kind of worn off in believability as time went on, the same was starting to happen in China. The ruling dynasty at the time was the Qing dynasty, which started by taking Beijing in 1644 and taking over the preceding Ming dynasty. They expanded China to new territorial heights, but by the 1800s they were declining for many reasons. Besides the usual culprits of corruption and tyranny that you find in any existing civilization on the planet, you have the fact that Europe's rise in power on the global stage was challenging China's supremacy in East Asia that was untouchable beforehand. The British humiliated China by sending it a ton of drugs in the form of opium to cause a drug epidemic, and then when China told them to stop, the British said make us, and they went to war where the British won and took Hong Kong. Then another war with the British happened where they lost. Europe afterwards began to economically force their way into China and take their own treaty ports, zones of influence, and overall making the Qing dynasty look very ineffective. China even lost a war to Japan, which chose to modernize, something that China didn't want to do out of pride until it was a bit too late to catch up. Economically, they didn't need to industrialize because their economy and military were so good and so self-contained, they could be fine with staying isolated. But the world wouldn't let it stay isolated. Losing a war to someone like Japan was extremely embarrassing at the time. The final kicker would be the Boxer Rebellion, which I won't get into details since House of History's video is on it, but man, it wasn't pretty. There were dozens of other various rebellions arising in the Qing dynasty in the 1800s that, while failed, were really devastating. The Taiping Rebellion, for example, had as many casualties as World War I, which I find amazing that so few people point that out. The 1800s was so bad for China that later historians would call the period from around 1839 onwards as the century of humiliation. Socially, the Qing dynasty was hated too, as the ruling class were Manchurians, who were made distinguished from the other populations within China such as the Han Chinese, the Mongols, the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, and so on. All male subjects were even required by law to wear a Q hairstyle, which was immensely unpopular because traditional Chinese philosophy and ideals supported not cutting your hair at all, which is why the Chinese often wore their hair into buns beforehand. The people were not happy by any stretch of the imagination, yet the Qing dynasty was still there. Kind of hard to really have an idea for a Mandate of Heaven if, despite everything that's happened, there's no new dynasty coming in to save the day. Well, that made the idea of a popular revolt for a republic much more popular. One such proponent was Sun Yat-sen, who had envisioned a Chinese republic. I made a previous video on some of his ideas and philosophies if you're interested in learning more about him, but he was definitely a major leader for a revolution. On October 10th of 1911, the revolution began. It would be called the Xinhai Revolution because in the Chinese calendar it was the Xinhai year, which means metal pig. This revolt would end up succeeding as more and more people would join in, and even several Qing-appointed governors would also join in. The final emperor of China wasn't able to do much because he was just a 6-year-old boy named Pu Yi. While there were others doing the governing and military leading for him, they were all different people with competing interests, so the Qing weren't well organized to do much. Pu Yi abdicated on February 12th of 1912, ending the Qing dynasty. Mongolia and Tibet achieved independence, while the rest of China was now a republic, but there were going to be some problems. Sun Yat-sen became the provisional president of China while they waited on establishing the new government. But there was a man who would rival him, Yuan Shikai. Yuan Shikai was a Qing general, who eventually sided with the revolutionaries, but he had ambitions of his own. Sun Yat-sen would compromise with Yuan Shikai by agreeing to make him the first legitimate president of China. But as a compromise, he wanted the capital of China to be moved from Beijing to Nanjing. The The reason is because China's a very large country, the size of the United States or the continent of Europe, and has a lot of different ethnic groups, cultures, languages, and so on. The capital had been in Beijing, more specifically within the Forbidden City complex, and was a sort of symbol of the elite isolating themselves off while they ruled China. Plus, it was further north, closer to the Manchurian homeland, and for similar reasons, the Mongols under the Yuan dynasty used the capital there as well. Nanjing, meanwhile, was closer to the middle, between southern and northern China. Yuan Shikai also had a considerable deal of more power up north due to his status as well as position of military strength, so moving the capital was also symbolically a way to keep things balanced. Yuan Shikai eventually agreed to the capital move, but as he was preparing to move down there, coincidentally, soldiers under Cao Kun, a Yuan loyalist, rioted in the city and many places caught on fire. This was used as a pretext for Yuan Shikai to go, "Oh no, I guess I'll have to stay up here in Beijing and be president from up here, oh well." The Provisional Senate eventually decided to just leave the capital of Beijing. Yuan Shikai would be a corrupt president using his military connections to conduct mafia-type tactics. People would be assassinated, and they could never quite prove it was him. Oh well. He would also conduct shady deals with foreign powers that made Sun Yat-sen and others a little nervous. Eventually, his corruption was so troublesome there would be a second Chinese Revolution on July 22nd of 1913. Several provinces in southern China would join the rebellion, but Yuan Shikai's military put down the revolt, further cementing his power over China. So much so that Yuan Shikai took an even more drastic seizure of power. Yuan Shikai decided to make himself an emperor of China. Once he declared the Empire of China, that ended up being too much, not just for southern China, but many other areas too. Many provincial governors, rather than submitting to an emperor, simply declared independence locally as warlords. Others once again joined a coalition under the Kuomintang Party to resist. This would be known as the National Protection War, which began on Christmas of 1915. On March 22nd of 1916, Yuan Shikai agreed to cancel the whole emperor thing and just stick with being president. The revolutionaries didn't care and just kept fighting their way up north. However, it wouldn't end up mattering because on June 6th of the same year, Yuan Shikai died. Now you'd think that this would solve the problems. It did effectively end the war, but it somehow made problems for China even worse. Yuan Shikai solidified himself so well that upon his death, even more warlords started appearing in China, and several warlords that declared independence in response to Yuan Shikai trying to become emperor didn't even bother trying to rejoin the Republic. Thus, China's warlord period began, meaning unfortunately the Chinese Revolution wasn't as successful as Sun Yat-sen would have hoped. This was a depressing video, but an important topic nonetheless. I feel like a lot of people outside of Asia just assume that, China became a republic, the communists in Kuomintang started a civil war, Japan invaded in the middle of that, and after World War II the communists won the Civil War. And while that is technically true, it leaves a lot of interesting and important details out of it. Even when China became a republic, it almost went back to being yet another imperial dynasty after only 3 years, making this revolution yet another example on how a republic or a democracy can be hard to establish, even if someone does have a strong vision for it. You gotta keep up the commitment